So I'm going to kick things off. I'm going to do a really quick intro, and then I will hand things off to our facilitator and our panelists, because that's what you're all here for. So I'm Christina LaFontaine. I'm the Design Lab Manager at the NYU Tandon Makerspace, which is in downtown Brooklyn, New York. And this is our Design Week. So welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is our big event for our annual Design Week. This year, it's all about designing waste out, focusing on sustainability, and kind of looking at and understanding, ways that all of us can do a little bit more and become part of a bigger solution to some of these issues, or at least work towards them. So this is our panel. We'll be speaking with four really interesting and inspiring individuals today, and hearing all about what they're working on. And I'm going to kick things over to Anne-Laure, who's our facilitator, to introduce our panelists as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anne-Laure Fayard. I'm faculty at NYU Tandon with an affiliation at NYU Stern, and I'm super excited to be able to facilitate our panel, Designing Waste Out, Taking Action, Making Change. The topic is exciting, important, and I've seen like some people mentioning, their excitement about the topic in the chat. And our four panelists, as you will see, are four passionate and inspiring social innovators. Let me first give you a quick agenda for the next 90 minutes, and then I'll give so I'm going to give you a quick intro on the focus of the panel, and then introduce our panelists, and you're seeing some of their pictures coming up here. I've asked each of them to prepare 5 to 7 minutes presentation of their work, and then I'll ask them a few questions, and eventually we'll open up for Q&A. During the presentation and the first part of the discussion, please feel free to type your question in the chat, and Christina, Som, and myself will kind of gather them and bring them back to the panelists. So just briefly, why the panel? So, our Design Week is on sustainability. It's one of our main theme at the Makerspace, whether it's workshops and talks or project we support. We have, a hydroponic farm, a plastic waste shredder, a community fridge. So sustainability is really at the core of what we're doing. Yet one thing that we noticed is that while there's definitely an interest in the issue, and we have some groups of students who are super passionate and really trying to make impact. We've also noticed that for other students, they feel overwhelmed. It's so complex. It's the systemic nature of the problem makes it difficult. And so that's a conversation we've had in our team, is like, how can we inspire and nurture behavioral change and collective action? And this observation is backed up by research that shows that because of this complexity of issues like climate change or environmental injustice happening, whether it's at the local, national, or global level, it prevents people from acting, as they ask themselves, what's the use? Like, what can we possibly do? It's like too big for us. So we decided to invite a few individuals who took action and initiated change in their own communities and organization, with a goal to create broader change at the societal level. And we have asked them to share with us their journey. How did they start? What motivated them? What challenge they met? And how they addressed them, hoping to inspire our own, ourselves and others during this conversation. So we're really thrilled to be joined by, as I said, four passionate change makers and innovators who are all working to make change happen. They have taken on the challenge of designing waste out through their work with community fridges, for youth programming, creating recycling pipelines, zero waste education, and community organizing in order to create a more sustainable, equitable, and inclusive future for all. So I'm going to go quickly introduce our panelists. Zenat Begum is a native New Yorker, an alumni of the New School, the owner and founder of Playground Coffee Shop, which used to be a hardware store in Bed-Stuy. And she's also the founder of Playground Youth, which is a nonprofit which aims to create a safe space to exchange art, cultural knowledge, and strategies through a range of accessible programs and events. And I learned about Zenat this summer when Christina, read an article about the community fridges that Zenat and her team was creating in Bed-Stuy. And we got really excited to know more about her work. And you know, of course, the impact was inspiring, but her approach, which was very community-centered, community-driven, was resonated with our own work at the Design Lab, which is very human-centered design. And you'll see that this focus on being community-centered is kind of a thread from, you know, between all our panelists. Bridget Vicente is a lifelong New York City Housing Authority resident, NYCHA, NYCHA resident, and she's the founder of the Inner City Green Team. She has led the fight for herself and fellow residents in the right to recycle for a decade. I met Bridget more than a year ago as I was interviewing her in the context of a research project I was doing on another nonprofit organization. And during this interview, I was really impressed with my collaborator by Bridget's passion and energy as she decided to act when she learned that NYCHA recycling programs was non-existent and there was no other options. And despite, you know, the complexity of the bureaucracy, she just went and with a small team just started the change. In 2018, she won the NYC X Collab Challenge and was honored at the Zero Waste in Shared Space recognition ceremony. Her project was recently featured on New York Pix 11, News 12, and Politico. And she's also a 2020 Echoing Green Fellow. And our third panelist is Mona Lisa Prasad, who is the Director of Sustainability at NYU Eats, Charterwell Higher Education, the food service provider at New York University. I've been exploring with Mona Lisa for now nearly 2 years, you know, ways of collaborating, and we started a number of, like, you know, small and hopefully bigger collaboration around supporting students' effort to address food waste, either through upcycling food or community fridges. She's been with Chartwell for more than 5 years, and prior to being in New York, while she was in the UK, she was struck by the sheer amount of edible food that would be wasted at her local supermarket. And it sparked her interest in learning about the nexus of food, waste, and energy. And so at NYU, she had successfully certified 5 dining halls as Green Restaurant Certified, and tracking and implementing all things sustainability in the food service industry. And she also plays a vital role in achieving the targets set by Cool Food Pledge, which is a global commitment to reducing greenhouse gas by 25% by 2030. And she holds a Master in Sustainability Management from Columbia University and an MBA specializing in sustainable operation and supply chain from University of Exeter in the UK. Our fourth panelist is Danielle Foster Russell. She's an engagement and operational professional with a focus on building and managing program and stakeholder development. Danielle is passionate about community capacity building and partnership for creative problem solving. And when we had a meeting to prepare this panel, Christina, Danielle, and I, we all got very excited about community-centered design. And so I'm very excited to know more about all the work she's been doing. Her work stems from the focus on equity, cultural responsiveness, and community engagement. And she's currently managing the Emergency Fresh Food Box Program at Grow NYC, a New York City-based nonprofit focused on protecting the environment, creating green spaces, and helping people stay healthy. Danielle has worked as an outreach associate with the New York City Department of Sanitation and spent 4 years working with New York City public schools to develop and implement their sustainability and waste management programming with the aim of achieving New York City's 0 by 30 sustainability goal. Danielle holds a BS in journalism from the City University of New York and a Master in Environmental Policy and Sustainability Management from the New School. So as you can see, we have like truly 4 experts who have been working all around regarding sustainability, social change, and community. So without further ado, let's hear from our panelists and their inspiring work. And I decided to follow the order of our website for the panel. So I'll first call out Zenit to share with us her work. Zenit, the floor is yours. Or the Zoom floor, I don't know what we call that.
The Zoom floor, it's everybody's floor. Hi, everyone. How's everyone doing? I'm so excited to be here today. So thank you for the lovely introduction. I feel so inspired because I've literally read about all of these amazing people that are on this panel with me today. And it's really amazing to see so many people who are putting forward the good work, whether if it is something that is given us the spotlight or not. I think we're actively trying to make change in our neighborhoods and our communities. And I think it's very humbling to be in the presence of everyone. So I'm just as nervous as I would be if this was happening in real life. So my name is Anat Begum. I'm the founder of Playground Coffee Shop. It's been a really riveting process these last 4 years in keeping a non-institutionalized nonprofit to do community work, because sometimes it means that there isn't a lot of legitimized avenues that we can go down just because we don't have resources. And this year we were really trying to push through that boundary, and came a lot of amazing programming out of it. And so we first opened, I wanted to challenge a lot of what people thought about youth programming and youth also facilitating. I think a lot of the times in youth facilitating and youth organizing, there are a lot of holes and cracks. And I feel like because we want to establish Playground as a business first, we're able to open up the possibilities of our networks and our partnerships with other organizations that do similar work to us. And we're specifically working in Bed-Stuy, which is very, for lack of using large jargon that I think that could diminish the value of efforts that happen in neighborhoods like ours, I would want to say that there's a lack of food sovereignty. Not there isn't food insecurity, but food and sovereignty. And there's a huge gap in knowledge within food and sustainable methods, and how restaurants, like the ones like that I run and that we all kind of go to in New York, what sustainable methods can they implement to make it less less waste heavy and cost effective, but also sustainable, right? And so these last 4 years, we've been trying to crystallize what that means. We've been implementing food programs that are built on sliding scale prices. Then we also have pre-ordered meals that we do, just because we want to be able to reduce the waste that we have. New York City's restaurant waste accounts for 75% of all of food waste that happens in New York, which is immense. It breaks my heart because there are countries and counties and states that are in this country that are food insecure, that don't even have access to this food that we're just throwing out recreationally, right? And so within organizing through Playground Youth, which is our 501c3 nonprofit, we've been able to use our network to leverage connections for people in our community, whether that is through doing a variety of community dinners, which are accessible meal based events that have a narrative of food justice that's centered around it, to be able to show people how localized you can make your food systems, aka using farmers markets, local farms, as well as just like other CSAs, to be able to use these and bring them into Black and brown neighborhoods. Prior to even having Playground as an institution serve CSA through our coffee shop, I didn't even know what a CSA was. My parents have been shopping at Food Town and C-Town for most of my childhood. We've also used EBT and food stamps to shop at Pathmark, and not some of the best items ever. But as I'm also exploring what food justice is, I'm learning about things that I've been deprived of, and also reintroducing my sense of food justice and food knowledge, because that's something that I don't have. And I think most Black and brown people are starting to understand that, like, we've been ingrained into this systematically racist food system that doesn't favor us. And I think that this year, more than anything, what COVID prevailed through its very wild discrepancies within how marginalized people are affected by COVID, is that racism is still the largest largest disease of all of them, right? Which is this, like, no matter what we implement, there is going to be things that are better off for white people than there are for Black and brown people. And that's something that Playground's actively trying to change. And we call everybody on our team changemakers. And I'm really proud of all the work that we've done this year, because we are individuals that, despite all of the hardships that we've gone through, we've been really resilient. We have started a community fridge program that kind of took the world by storm. We started a greenhouse that was built in October of 2020, which I'm really excited to show the world what the fruits of our labor is come our first harvest. So give me a few months. I promise I'll have some better pictures. And also we have a Take One Leave One library, which is an extension of our bookstore, which is the Playground Annex. We chiefly house and prioritize titles by queer, Black, and brown folks. And this is something that we wanted to bring to our community without a system of monetary support. And so we are just able to distribute titles that talk about these radicalized subjects, right? And what is radical if it's not accessible? And so this year we've been able to just put together all of our programming to, be able to service our community and beyond. And I think that every day that we are working towards a better and perfected idea of what these systems are going to look like. And, I'm not really sure what putting a fridge out in the middle of Bed-Stuy is going to do, but I really hope that at least it starts the conversation within food justice and sovereignty. So thanks for listening.
Thank you very much. I'll keep the question after, and please, for our audience, like attendees, please put your questions and thoughts in the chat so that we can keep the flow going. And I'm really looking to the harvest of a greenhouses, and it's if you need help, I'll volunteer to come and help. Next one is Bridget. So we're moving from food to more plastic waste, but I think it's the still same idea of sovereignty and getting community to step up and be empowered. Bridget, the Zoom floor is yours. You're muted, Bridget. That's we have to do it at least once a day.
Of course, of course, and it's me. I'm the queen. I'm the queen. They need to call me the unmute queen or come up with a name, something like that. I'm famous. Hello, everyone. Good evening. I'm so glad to be here as a panelist to talk about my baby. It's something that's very close to my heart. It didn't come out of my body, but it did come out of my soul. And we've been here fighting the good fight, and we've just really been pushing forward and moving at the next phase of this. I myself am a NYCHA resident. I'm a mother and a wife, and I've a two-time award-winning social entrepreneur, and I carry a legacy of community activism. My mother was a very powerful community activist, and although at the time when I was young and I was helping her with her work reluctantly, I was very intrigued about her work, and I saw how her work affected people. It touched people and it changed people, and then still today, even though she's, not with us, I really, people still talk about her work. People still talk about her. So she exists, and she exists in me. So I founded In the City Green Team out of frustration and trying to find an easy and convenient way for NYCHA residents like myself to recycle. At that time, NYCHA's recycling program was virtually non-existent, and there were no other options. There were no other options to recycle. So that's where In the City Green Team was created out of a need and out of frustration after years of recycling. And I was taking my recycling to the bin, a child that was sitting on the bin, because that's what it was used for, told me that, I don't know why you waste your time doing this. It just goes in the garbage. And it really brought up a lot of questions, and I needed answers. So that's where In the City Green Team came in. So we call it our Right to Recycle Collection Initiative, and it employs an innovative service delivery approach that incorporates education, accessibility, and convenience in the form of a door-to-door pickup that's set out by tenants, and it's coupled with the use of data and incentives to influence behavior change. Not only would this be an easy and effective way of capturing recyclables from buildings, but it also would create much needed jobs at NYCHA for me and my fellow residents. What we've learned is residents tend to be more receptive to change when proposed by neighbors. They promote a certain trust and buy-in, and the strategy of neighbors helping neighbors, we feel, help raise awareness more organically about the new recycling program, and it reached residents in ways that wasn't possible before. So we had a pilot in Brownsville, and during that pilot, we engaged a greater like 300 residents, and we were there for this 6-month pilot. Well, it actually was 4-month pilot. We collected 8 tons of recyclables, and for the remaining time we were there, which was maybe a little over a year, we collected an additional 10 tons of recyclables. So, you know, and in the creation, we created resident leaders. And right now we've named them the Real Deal, which is the Resident Environmental Action League. And these leaders have made a pledge to take a formidable environmental action to create behavioral change amongst themselves and their fellow residents to reduce their individual carbon footprint. And these residents have been instrumental in the success of the recycling initiative, because it's a certain trust and buying that neighbors are helping neighbors, and then they see the service and they want to know what's going on. And it creates just a really just simple way for people to do something for the environment, and with what they because they thought they didn't have any way of doing it any other. They didn't think that they could help in any other way. So this is definitely like a basic 1, 2, 3 method that empowers residents to do something to divert recyclables from going to landfill. And this cumulative action greatly impacts the reduction of climate change when it's implemented on a large scale. So my partner and I have been unwavering in spreading the gospel of our green ministry, and we want to send the message that Black and Brown environmental action matters. It's something that we call BEAM, and it was created to illustrate that residents. It illustrates and rebukes the myth that people who suffer from environmental injustices, even though it impacts them the most, and they don't have the luxury, that they're not concerned with its effects. Our organization has proven that residents living in underserved communities are interested in the effects of climate change, and will work to transform the environment when the opportunity is given, and through education and the resources.
Thank you very much, Bridget. And I think it's really interesting to see how you were you kind of answered the question of how do we get people to at least do one first little thing, your 1, 2, 3 3 methods, and then get to maybe doing more. But so kind of empowering people and making them realize that it's maybe sometimes not as complicated as what they felt, and making them act. Thank you very much. And I do, you've all seen the picture, and I've seen Bridget in that, I remember the space full of plastic and with all the residents kind of going through that. So it was really inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing, Bridget. Moving now to Mona Lisa, who, we were thinking when we were looking at our panelists, we wanted to have people who are grassroots social activists working with local community, but also people who are trying to make change in bigger institutions and organizations, because I think that these big organizations are important stakeholders for change. And there are different sets of challenges in working in this context, but there are also very important to keep in mind. And I'm sure there are also some similarities. I saw you, Mona Lisa, kind of nodding, so I'm sure there were some similarities. So the floor is yours.
Thanks so much. And Laura, first of all, thank you for having me on this panel. I'm just looking at everybody here on the floor per se, and all of us are women, and it just makes me so proud to be amongst all of you. It's great. And Women's, March 8th is coming up, and we're celebrating a week ahead. We're good. So I just kind of wanted to kick it off. I know I'm going back to kind of childhood and growing up on the slide, but I was born and brought up in little but yet large islands in India. They're called Andaman and Nicobar Islands. They're actually off the southeast coast of India, closer to Indonesia. So if you get that picture on the map. So we're a tropical island where nothing is really grown except for bananas, coconuts, and of course fish. So, you know, growing up, younger days, I still remember we would wait for the ship to come by from mainland India, kind of carrying all the fruits and vegetables. And a single apple in those days would cost in dollars now $1. So in those days in India, it would cost 100 rupees, which would probably easily feed about 2 to 3 meals. So that was just for a single apple. So I just wanted to kind of paint that picture, you know, that scarcity, not driven by anything else but distance itself, right? Through the years, I then moved to the United Kingdom, and then I came across Stewart, who's the godfather of food waste. While I was actually studying, it was crazy because I was doing a master's in tourism and hospitality management. That was my focus to start with. I see Anne-Laure like, what? That's how my focus was. And then, you know, with this event with Stewart, what he was doing with Feeding the 5,000 or Feed Back, his organization, was to take so-called wonky, but basically vegetables that are not really pretty to sit on the shelves, but he was taking all these wonky vegetables and creating meals. And his idea was to feed 5,000 people and show people that these are edible. It's perfectly edible and people are just throwing it to the garbage because they cannot eat it because it looks wonky. So during my time there, I was actually in 2011 serving curry potatoes. English and British love curry. It's not an Indian thing like this, but you know, rice and curry, and I was serving curry potatoes there, and it just made me so happy just serving all these people, but also then realizing all these vegetables would have actually just gone to the landfill and not being fed while there's so many people hungry out there. That then kind of said, okay, then I was like, well, I need to get out of tourism and hospitality and then go into food service. And that's when I came across a position, actually a part-time position with Compass Group. They're headquartered in the UK, and Compass Group is the largest food service provider currently. And I worked with them as a cashier, actually while studying as a part-time job. So I kind of led from there. And then I also enrolled in a one-planet MBA, Anne-Laure mentioned earlier, with the University of Exeter. And that's when I went into kind of the nitty-gritty of sustainable supply chains. What is it? What is it that takes that food from the farm to that fork, but also what happens after fork? There's quite a lot, and people often just end it with fork. But what happens when there's waste on food in your plate, right? So kind of going that whole cycle. And then I suddenly got an opportunity at Columbia University for MSc in Sustainability Management. It was a scholarship that I could not pass on. And that's how I moved across the pond in 2013, 2014. And ever since, it's everything relating to food waste. And, you know, food waste, I see it as, of course, food being wasted, but also energy, water, resources, labor, hours and hours of work in a farm. And that's where, so when people say it's all about people, planet, profit, that people aspect is huge, right? That power that goes into just bringing those carrots, potatoes, and cauliflower to your plate is massive. To then just waste it in the end is what hurts. And I think, you know, Zina was telling earlier as well, how restaurants, there's 75% of food is wasted, and that's so hurting. And then, of course, I went back to Compass Group in the US, albeit, and I started working there slowly but steadily. And then I actually came to NYU in 2019 as the director of sustainability. So that's when I was like, okay, this is my moment to put all that I learned, all that I saw into use, into practice, into making change. And I just, you know, steadfast on that. So what we do with NYU Eats and Chartwells here on the NYU campus is we track our waste internally, back of house kitchens. So we're tracking waste year on year, month on month, seeing how we can, trim something really fine so we don't have that much waste. What do we do with the onion peels and carrot bottoms and tops? Make broth out of it or make something out of it and upcycle that entire product. We had farmers markets that we host, and we had one beautiful one in November of 2019, actually, because of course 2020 was COVID driven. But that one, we featured a really good, sorry about that noise, featured a route to STEM guide. So students who were coming to pick up this produce could get a route to STEM guide, which then shows them if you're taking carrots, you use your carrots in whatever, but then you use the tops to make a carrot pesto, as an example. So that sort of education is what my kind of focus area is. Front of house, if I can call that. Back of house, we do quite a lot. With food recovery, we partner with some organizations within NYU, City Harvest, Bowery Mission, because, at the end of the day, there is food left over. And the last thing I want to see is that going to the garbage, right? So it's untouched, edible food. And it just makes us so happy. We donated about, I think it was about 12,000 pounds of food to City Harvest, which is just remarkable. And, we have a donation coming up next week as well, which just makes me so proud of NYU, of the community that I am in, who's always willing to kind of serve beyond their little community. So, and then I kind of mentioned Tristram Stewart in the beginning and an apple. So just to kind of circle that back, I met Tristram Stewart in a Stop Food Waste Day event. It's a Compass Group kind of initiative where we host upcycling and circular economy kind of panels. And far from this room, he recognized me and he actually said, "You were the person who was serving curry potatoes and I will always remember you." And he actually gave me an apple because he knows this whole apple story. So it was just remarkable. I just want you to know there are very few of us out there who are doing this. So it's a very small world, yet so impactful. So yeah, that's it for now. I'll pass it on to Anne-Laure.
Thank you very much, Mona Lisa. It's always interesting to see how, at some point in your life, you put all the experience together and put them in. And I can see a thread. I'm not saying it now because then Daniel will feel like I have to say something here. So I'll just be quiet. So I'll pass it to Daniel and I'll share with you. I've noticed that many similar, like many threads, interesting threads, but there's one that I'll see if Daniel is on the track or not. Daniel, I'm looking forward to hearing about, and then we're continuing with food. So that's a perfect.
My name's Danielle Foster Russell. I live in Brooklyn with my partner and my two beautiful children. I've been here for the last maybe 20 years. 2021 will be 20 years. And I was originally born in Trinidad and Tobago, raised in the rural part of the island, southern part of the island. There's my beautiful twin island. Every chance I get to sort of show it, I take it, right? Because why not? I moved here with my mother and a few of my uncles and my aunt because, that was what, poor families in Trinidad tried to emigrate to the States, right? And so to see if we can find, economic relief in some way. Of my sort of progression to here is that I spent the first about 17 years of my life there dreaming of becoming a flight attendant. And that, shout out to all flight attendants, but I've changed my mind. And when I moved here, just started working before going to college and figuring out that like $6.25 an hour wasn't gonna cut it, right? So spent the going to school in New York City. I took some classes at Medgar College and then a few others at Hunter College, and got married, had some kids, one kid, and then worked, like Rihanna says. And I was working for a corporation and realized that I was sort of miserable. I needed to be connected to the result of my work. I needed to feel like there was some kind of an impact that I was sharing with the folks that are receiving the results of the work that I was doing. And so without that, I just felt useless. I just felt really unhappy. And so go back to school, start thinking about what I really cared about. Growing up in the rural part of the island allowed me to appreciate sharing, allowed me to appreciate how important community is for withstanding a difficulty. It allowed me to appreciate nature and the environment, and to really just have a love for it. I think just loving the effects of it, but also seeing myself as part of it. And so, I figured I could try to do something to do with the environment, and that is why I decided to try and do that degree. From that time, I think I graduated in 2015, and then had another kid, and then started my journey in sustainability and waste and in engagement and stakeholder engagement, and here I am today. I'm gonna quickly give a quick shout out to my mom, because why not? She's dope, she's beautiful, she's the foundation of everything that is great about me comes from her. And those are my two schools I went to in Trinidad. What I do right now, what I was doing for the last 4 years before COVID had a lot to do with trying to help New York City public schools divert their waste from landfills. So not unlike what a few members of our panelists were doing or is thinking about doing. That is really hard. It was really, really, really hard work. And so I deeply respect anyone who is having even a small amount of success doing this kind of work, because those years that I spent trying to help New York City public schools shift their focus and divert their waste and sort of, learn about the climate change issues that we're dealing with were some of the toughest years of my life in terms of professional years, but some of the most rewarding years of my life. So I worked for Grow NYC's Zero Waste Schools program. And essentially what we were doing with that program is going into elementary, middle, and high schools. And, schools are dynamic spaces, rich for change, but also can be slow for change. And what I loved most about working in schools is that the students are all very excited, no matter what age or range they're at. They want to learn about loving their environment. They want to learn about loving their spaces, and they want to learn about how they can be change makers or activists, even in their classrooms. And so that was super rewarding and continues to be. The program was defunded early last year because of COVID. And many of us, either got rerouted to different programs or ended up working at different organizations. We were able to get a little bit more funding. And I think even though the program is downsized, it's still doing the work. Shout out to the folks who run it, Kate Wimsatt and Jackie Gentinen. I moved on within Grow NYC to work on food relief and food insecurity, because the city decided that was an acute problem, and it was. And so I really feel sort of lucky that I was able to keep doing something that felt important to me and to be useful during a time when our city was really, really struggling to meet basic needs like healthcare, but also food, right? We all, you guys have all talked about how food waste is really important to you. Zanat, you talked about how food sovereignty is so important to you in Bed-Stuy. And, this is my first time working on a food related program. And so I'm also learning so much about the landscape, about the industry, about who needs the food and about how to get food to folks and the logistics that go behind it, and how to get people good food, right? Growing my sea, you know, we have a lot of green markets and whatnot, but this program is a little different because it's about getting food already packaged. I have a beautiful picture that I'd love to show you, but I can show you later. Getting food that's already boxed. So we send like 20-pound boxes of fresh produce, fruit, and we do send about 2 pantry items, so rice or dried beans. We don't do any of the canned stuff, which is fine. Folks do can, that's great, but we work really hard to make sure that the food is fresh and the food is as organic as we can get it, and that we're supporting local or regional farmers to stay profitable, but also giving them a market to bring the food down here to folks who may not have access to a green market, or folks who may not have access to a pantry, or folks who may not have access to a grocery store. We're trying to build relationships with organizations that will take the boxes from us every single week and then give an individual box to residents of their community so they can bring it home and cook a meal for their families. Each box has about 8 meals in it, and it has been extremely rewarding, really difficult, and it's challenged me into thinking about where to place my empathy, right? I can feel a lot of empathy, but how do I use my empathy in a way that is actually useful for the folks who need it, rather than like, feeling it, right? I can sort of apply it to my work. And I think that's been the greatest takeaway for me in this work so far. I'm looking forward to learning so much more. There's so much to learn, and I'm just sort of excited about that.
I had a couple of questions, but I see that we have also a lot in the chat, so I don't want to use too much. And I'm thinking to maybe ask you 1 or 2 questions, and then if you have some questions, I saw you taking notes when others were talking. So if you have anything you want to ask each other, I think that's the time, to do it. But I was just wondering, I think it's for Zenat and Danielle, like both, I think, yeah, Bridget and Mona Lisa mentioned like an event. Like for Bridget, it was the kid sitting on the bin and telling her like, hey, why are you recycling, useless? And Mona Lisa working, and giving this curry. And I'm wondering, Zenat, what was there? Maybe it was just like, an ongoing thing, but was there this kind of moment where you were like, this is it, I have to do something? And same thing for you, Danielle.
Okay, so it's very important to be able to, put things on a timeline. I think, especially for the work that we're trying to do right now, because we want to be able to measure success. Mm-hmm. And that's what a lot of nonprofits care about, is whether or not your impact is measurable. Can you put it on a scale, right? I didn't think about it so much more like what was going to be seen as trendy. I think when I started Playground, I couldn't get a job anywhere. I have a degree from the New School. I have an economics degree. I studied Chinese, the language, and history. Why isn't it that I couldn't find a job? Why is it that people are fearful of hiring Black and Brown people with very diverse backgrounds? On paper, we look really good. I have a degree that I worked so hard for, yet there was a huge gap in whether, like, in the economy and able to employ me. And I think that ultimately made me so stubborn in trying to create Playground and look at community, issues that are related to our community specifically. Just at the start of like our, the inception of Playground, when we opened, it was a few days right before Trump got elected into office. So that was very hard for a lot of my friends who would then, be separated from their families, not be able to return to the US to finish their education, be able to get a degree that they would ultimately go back home with to be able to, spread some sort of knowledge or wealth, whatever it is that you can contribute to your families back home, right? I started to see things becoming actively defunded. I am a student of classical music. I've been a musician for the last probably 15 years of my life, but I was classically trained and studying actively for 10 years. It's a program that I've seen actively get defunded every year since I've been in the in the public school system. I've been in public school since I started my educational career, right? And thinking about what I get to eat every day. When I used to look down on my tray, it was a frozen pizza, either the shape of a circle, triangle, or square, which are friendly shapes for people who are learning them for the first time, right? I'm also seeing pancakes that come in a plastic bag that are reheated. I'm also looking at milk that is in a carton. I'm not really sure which farm it came from, but it says USDA organic, USDA approved for usage of within schools, right? And that's my first experience of food, is prison food within the education system. I also taught at Rikers, in which I saw exactly what food they were preparing. And you're going into public institutions that are publicly funded, that are just dropping the ball so hard on nutrition. Just because kids are impoverished doesn't mean that you offer them low level quality of food. Just because people are incarcerated doesn't mean you do that, you know? So why is it that we think that's okay for these people to go through this, but then as New Yorkers, as people of the US, we're able to go to small restaurants and support small businesses? Who does food and food sovereignty favor? I'm not really sure. And I think that's when the conversation started for me, because I taught at Rikers right as soon as I opened Playground, and it became really hard for me to be able to do both because my life took off in one way and I wasn't able to teach in the capacity that I was able to. But I remember I was teaching a class and a kid brought a plastic bag with noodles and cold water, and he put a bunch of spices in it and he just left it on the counter, and he goes, well, we don't get hot water here because that's seen as a weapon. So this room temperature cold water is going to get this, noodles will soak it up, and in about a few hours, not a few minutes, in a few hours, I'll be able to eat this. I immediately got on the bus that day, going out of Rikers into my car, and I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep being a person that's going to contribute to the New York City food waste system by creating a restaurant that everybody thinks is hip, when my students and people in my life and even my trajectory of food is insecure, you know? It changed everything about my position as a leader within my community, but also as an entrepreneur. I didn't want to just aimlessly waste food, and also just like, you know, act like I was going to win a James Beard Award for establishing this new kind of caviar or something. It's like, there are so many systems of food that my culture has created, that our culture has created, that we can't even benefit from. And I think that's where it all starts, is that our own personal stories create the need for these kinds of systems to exist. And I think that because I exist and I think this way, I also thought that maybe there are people out there in the world who think similarly to me. And so when Playground opened, you know, the story of like, if you build it, they will come kind of thing. And surely they came knocking. And 5 years later, here we are talking about food sustainability. And for the first time, people are listening. So.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Danielle?
I think I've had several of those moments in my life, right? So several moments where I had to sort of stop and think about what I was doing, and think about if it was meeting first the needs for myself. And I think working at, look, I have no judgments about folks who work at corporations. People do what they need to do in order to feed their families, right? But I was not only not being underpaid, I just felt underutilized. I had gotten a promotion where they gave me 3% raise that was going to amount to about $30 on my paycheck every week, which is not enough to buy a weekly Metro card. So I wasn't even going to be able to get to work with my raise. And that kind of, I mean, of course, I sort of dealt with that, but I didn't feel valued. And I also realized that I wasn't valuing what I could do, and I wasn't learning enough, and I wasn't feeling useful. And so my sort of switch happened from a very, very low point, from a very depressed point, professionally, but it was seeping into my life, into my personal life. And I had just become a mom. I was trying to figure out, I don't know. I think that at that time I was just sort of taking myself and my impact in the world more seriously. And so I decided I didn't want to be miserable anymore, and I quit. I started school. That's not true. I started school because I was like, okay, what can I do? What do I care about? Like I was saying before, what do I care about? What do I want to learn about? You know, what industry, I actually even Googled what industries would be growing. And also at the same time, you know, addressing some of these problems that we're having, you know, in our globally actually. And so that was one of, you know, sustainability and environmentalism and stuff like that came up. I was like, you know, I don't think of myself, you know, as an environmentalist in the sort of way that I not back then I didn't, not the way that I do now. I thought of myself as someone who cared about the way that we live our lives on this planet. So I think our planet will be fine. I think we are the ones who suffer and ultimately maybe perish if we don't deal with things. And so I was like, okay, I'm miserable. I don't want to, I'm really unhappy. I'm going to try to enroll in this program. If they accept me, I'll see where it goes. I'll do it part-time. If I don't like it, I'll drop out. And I liked it. I met people who also were thinking and feeling the same way. And I started to see that, oh, maybe I could craft a way for myself to do something that was meaningful to me. So, you know, mine started from sort of a self-serving kind of space, and then grew differently. And then I quit my job because I was just, I couldn't do it anymore. I found out like maybe like 2 days after I quit that I was pregnant. So, you know, that wasn't the easiest thing to do, but I don't regret it. I'm really happy that I made that change. And then, you know, every change I've made in my career so far, so I think every year I make a little change. I think the most recent one was last year. You know, COVID forced that change onto me. I wasn't thinking about food in the same way. I know a lot of friends of mine were thinking about food. I wasn't. I was more thinking about energy and carbon and waste. And I still care about that stuff. But I realized that like when COVID happened and I saw all those lines of people looking for food, my own uncle didn't have food and had lost his work. You know, being able to run this program became sort of a really important challenge for me. And so it's been a year that has been really difficult, but I think that I've been lucky. You know, I've been blessed to be able to put my mind to good use and to withstand the depression that sometimes comes from, you know, watching your community, you know, all of the businesses shutter, or watching people who can afford to leave the city, and folks here think about how to withstand and how to survive. That has been being able to like do something as simple as deliver boxes of food to people every day, and see that it actually is causing a difference in their lives, and that the food is good food. It means a lot to me personally, and I know it means a lot to the community. And working with organizations that care has been a great privilege. I mean, last year we delivered, at the end of the year last year, we had actually gotten to 1 million meals delivered. And right now we're up to, I think, 1.2 million meals that we've delivered, and 163,000 food boxes that we've delivered in the last, since April. I think 44 weeks that we've been doing the program. So, you know, our contract is supposed to end in June. And it's a somber thing, right? Because I desperately want folks to be able to build their own systems of getting access to really good food. That's actually the goal, and to be able to have the ability to procure that food for themselves. So free emergency food is something that is important, but it only exists because folks don't actually have the ability to sort of do the system on their own. So as much as my job will change on June 30th, I hope that it comes along with folks having the ability to take care of their most essential needs. And I want to be able to be a part of that. If it means that we do a retail version of the food, or if we work with communities to sort of support themselves, as well as like subsidize some of the food, that, you know, whatever we can do to sort of help folks to become more able to procure the food on their own, I'm really happy, and to make it more affordable as well would be really, I look forward to that. I hope that answered the question that you asked.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And it was just nice also to hear just the more of the background. So there are 2 points that, made me think of what I know about Bridget's work, which is your insistence of like really getting the community involved. And I think that like, having the residents involved and this notion of service is like something that is at the core of the work that Bridget and her team is doing. So Bridget, I was just curious, like, how do you, okay, and there's another question that I've been thinking of that Zeynep made about measuring impact. So I guess I have a twofold question for you. One is around service, and how do you get people to, feel empowered in this process? In particular, I know that you've been trying to not only empower them in terms of like recycling and climate change, but also giving them work. And I think it kind of connects with Danielle's of like, and even Zeynep's work on like trying to make their community more resilient and having and empowering them at all different levels. So I'm just curious if you could tell us more about the work you've been doing in terms of job creation and education.
I unmuted myself that time without anyone telling me. It, where it stemmed from, where the idea stemmed from, of course, is coming up with a solution on how to collect these recyclables, and excuse me, and incorporating work opportunities for residents to collect those recyclables. And the measuring it is just meeting people where they are, and people find it, if they don't have the infrastructure in place to recycle, we have to make it as convenient as possible to give them the ability to. And that definitely includes if the recyclables are put in the bins, but yet they're being thrown in the garbage, that doesn't create any type of, we can't get any type of measurement from that. So if we are speaking to them and adding that secret sauce, if you will, which is residents speaking to residents. And I noticed that that was a great measurement in having residents getting involved, is because I say, I'm from here. I'm not an outsider. I'm from here. I understand. I know what you're going through. So it was a trust factor built there. And like I said, meeting them where they are, making it extremely convenient, and letting them know that the power is in their hands, and letting them know that you can get, this can be an opportunity for you, as well as creating an incentive piece that states that provides benefits as like rewards, like green rewards, to motivate residents to stay interested and stay enthused. And it just became infectious. Like one person started yarning and everybody else started yawning, and people want to be a part of the solution. So that was a lot of the aspect of it. And of course the education. Of course, we if people shy away and say, well, I don't know how to recycle. Well, we're here. There's no excuses. We're here to teach you how to recycle and build your awareness to understand exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Great, thank you so much. Mona Lisa, I see that we have like more and more questions. So I just have like a quick question, and I think a lot of the other question might lead to you, but as we end up in education and you're working in an educational institution, I'm just curious, like, is like, do you see part of your work, or have you been thinking of like how to change behaviors or educate both students and faculty, staff at NYU? And how do you, see that as being part of your work? I think I kind of know part of the answer, but not everybody knows.
You probably do. I was actually just typing it in the chat as well. I often say that most sustainability issues, if I may call them, require kind of systemic change. But it also requires collaboration, and collaboration amongst the stakeholders, businesses, student bodies, student government, guests, patrons, whoever just walks through that door. And that's how I kind of view it, right? And it's not like you're telling them, well, the climate is going to ruin you, the planet is gone, but put not a positive, but put a spin on it, which will then entice people. So don't negate everything and don't be negative about it is always kind of my mantra with that. And then show the collaboration. And, that's something really important to me, with NYU Eats, our collaboration with City Harvest, as an example, our collaboration with, as our Sea Straws, it's a company that was actually an entrepreneurship company at NYU, and they started making paper straws instead of plastic straws. So building that community relationship and partnership and collaboration, if I can call all of those things, is very kind of crucial to showcase and then also spread that message, right? It's not a lone stand. You're not going to, I can't go out there and be like, well, I'm the only one who's making the change. That's really not how it'll happen. And even if I can give an example for back in India, the same thing is happening there as well now. They're starting to see that it takes a lot of stakeholders involved. Taking away from food to kind of change the topic in Delhi, which is the capital of India now, and their pollution rates are enormous. And during COVID, they actually cleared so they could actually see, and their visibility went from, I think it was 100 meters or 10 meters to 100 meters. And then now they're all coming together, the governments are coming together, people are coming together and saying, well, we need to do something and probably, remove diesel, make sure there are laws that say, well, get only electric cars or something of that nature. So it's as small as an education level and a school, university level, but I think it all just applies throughout. So my message out there is collaborate to kind of tackle all the sustainability challenges that come through us.
Super, thank you for bringing the collaboration. I think that you've been inspiring people. Christina, maybe we can move for the next 15 minutes to a few of the questions. I know you've been picking them up, so please.
Yeah, I can start reading a couple. I think a few of these you all actually already answered, so I'm going to sort of pick through and see what hasn't. I think for this one, this is the first one that was actually specifically directed at Bridget, but I think it applies for a lot of you. And again, some of you have touched on it, but I think, so Sarah says a couple of years ago, NYCHA released the waste management plan, which included a series of measures that would improve the recycling system. This included trash chutes, drop-off sites. I know you also had a significant part of this plan. I'd like to know if the plan has been affected in any way during the pandemic and what are the main challenges you're facing in its implementation. And we actually received a couple questions about sort of how the pandemic has been affecting, your work and the programs that you're offering as well.
Hello, thanks for your question. Initially it didn't, but we thought to be safe to halt the collection process because we just did not know. So it didn't affect us it affected us in a way that we stopped the collection at Brownsville. But it was very helpful in us, just reevaluating everything and expanding on our initiatives. So today we are moving over to another development in East Harlem, and it's even better now because NYCHA is completely on board with supporting the work, and the new chair, with all his wonderful efforts, has made a stern commitment into seeing that this project scale and expands.
It's a little interesting because I think because of all of the initiatives that we've all taken this year, it's something that we weren't naturally going to take the course of if COVID never occurred, And I think something that I really admire about Bridget is it's a COVID, it's a situation that is not only particular to COVID, but also forever, you know, and we're learning how to teach people systems and skill sharing that is kind of unheard of. And as we're troubleshooting, we're also trying to understand what overall these like these projections of these like projects are, right? And what the trajectory of these projects are. And when COVID is involved, you can't see the future of anything. There is no light at the end of the tunnel. That's one of the most frustrating parts about this, is that we're actively getting defunded. PPP loans are not given to organizations that really deserve them and are in the community doing grassroots organizing. We lose momentum because if people stop reporting on us, then we don't have coverage of the work that we do. People forget that we exist and will continue to exist. And people also believe that these are COVID specific initiatives. And that's also frustrating because this means that like they're anticipating these things to kind of end, and the ending to coincide with the new future that will happen post COVID. So a lot of these things feel short-lived. A lot of these things feel insincere. And I think because I envision my community to just get a larger pool of resources every year, I will actively try to look for those solutions in my community. But it almost becomes so much more, everything is so radicalized right now, and everybody's thinking that I'm a radical person, and then what the things that I'm doing are just so out of the ordinary. And I almost think that it's radical that people don't think that these things are just normal and normalizing these things. And so it puts us an immense amount of pressure on organizers and facilitators to do the work that all the while we think that is, you know, completely just necessary for our communities. But now we're being seen as extraordinary people. And I'm okay with that because I know I'm an extraordinary person, and I know everybody on this panel is an extraordinary person. That's why we're here, right? But we need to stop. I think everybody's desensitized. And I think at this point in my life, I want to kind of go on and show people how to do this work and to not gatekeep, because this isn't something that I am passionate about for myself, but also for generations to come. There are people who've pioneered these kinds of workshops and programs that aren't even alive anymore. And to those people, what can I say? How do you measure your own success, and what do you see, and how can you actually live within the fruits of your own labor? I'm not quite sure, but I think that for as long as things like these exist in pester, we're going to be here and we're going to continue to do the work, whether it's COVID related or not. This pandemic took more than enough from my life, but it's also given me so much in perspective. And every day I'm just so ecstatic to be able to be around a group of folks who want to organize with me and see the benefit in organizing. And yeah, you know, hopefully this is the momentum that we can bring into future years post COVID, because I really hope that it doesn't stop here, because that's where my concern kind of lies.
As a follow-up to that, and I think this kind of applies to all of you as well, and maybe specifically Bridget and Zainat, but I think even to Mona Lisa and Danielle working in, you know, sort of larger organizations, it's like, how do you, this followed up on a question that we had about sort of like engagement, and, you know, the question specifically is asking, do you think organizing on social media helps get people more engaged in sustainability movements, but maybe also just thinking generally of like, you know, now that more people are motivated and sort of, you know, energized, you know, what are some ways, maybe social media is the answer, but maybe there are other things too that you're seeing that are ways to continue to get that engagement and kind of continue through with that. Obviously, you know, it remains to be seen what'll happen, but yeah, I guess, what are your thoughts on social media and engagement and continuing that momentum with all of the work and the projects that you're doing? And I think also this might come from a student's perspective of how to get that engagement. So do you recommend social media as a tool, or are there other things that maybe students that are interested in starting something themselves should be kind of looking to?
I was going to say, I think social media is a good tool if it's used strategically, right? As it pertains to the work that I'm doing, I've tried really hard to get our organization not to talk about our program on social media, because we know how many boxes we can deliver. We know the max amount of food that we can give. We know what our capacity for delivering this food is. We know what the organizations that we're partnering with, what their capacities are. They're lean. I go after small, boots on the ground type of organizations. I shy away from working with larger ones because they have the capacity to find funding in other places. But these smaller organizations, they're doing really hard work, and our program wants to support them.